Hello, welcome to the Voices of Veterans podcast. My name is Dan Hamilton, your host for episode 7. As always, the Voices of Veterans podcast is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush at the Veterans Land Board. Here at the Voices of Veterans podcast, we have an opportunity to tell the success stories of Texas veterans who have overcome tribulation, have overcome challenges, and continue to serve and lead in their communities. Today we have a great opportunity to sit down with Naji Kelley, the CEO of BLNDED, based right here in Austin, Texas. Naji, thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you became the CEO of BLNDED.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Dan, for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. I've been in Austin about 4 years now. So starting out for me was information technology, where I'm formally trained. I left corporate and decided to go into the military to get that leadership development, and then migrate over into the business space. So for me, seeing more stories of color to get an understanding if I want to go into business, who's doing what, how can I learn from their journeys? That was the start for me, and then leveraging what I've done on the technical side and having a logistics experience being in the military, how do we help bring those stories to the masses while we're working on at BLNDED Media?
So for the audience's understanding, your military background is in supply?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, excellent. And you were able to transition your military experience, your military skills, and you actually blended that, or you attached that with your passion for business. What initially sparked your passion for business?
So it's interesting when you kind of like look back on whether you're in a situation where you might not like what you're doing in your 9 to 5, you might not like where you're at in your life. You kind of look back on things in your past. So for me, I was able to kind of look back and say, oh, stuff I was doing at 6, 8 years old, playing around with just Army figures, but the operational aspect to it, then having like hour-long conversations with my mom about talking her head off about business, those are natural things I was doing. And for me, it was like, that's a passion of mine. So it wasn't until my dad, who's a union electrician, he's prior Navy as well, he took me on different side projects as an electrical union electrician. So for me, it was seeing from a business standpoint, get into the construction industry, seeing a house being built, seeing like that skeleton structure and how things develop and progress. That was interesting for me of, okay, the things I'm doing at home and just playing around, it wasn't until I was really like 15, almost 15 and a half, and he was saying, man, you can't play with the Army figures anymore. You gotta
escalate that.
Right, you gotta do something for real. So for me, it was like, let me take what I'm doing over here and for fun and apply it more into a business type setting. And it was the stuff I was getting ready for college. From the IT standpoint, I was helping him with a lot of different issues. So he saw how naturally it came to me. So it was like, let me apply that. And for me, it was just doing residential work specifically. So whether it be a laptop, making repair, building computers, PC, troubleshooting, stuff like that, I was able to get clientele from a job I was working at Office Max at the time, just doing like logistics, operations stuff. I was able to kind of build clientele that way and just build my experience of, okay, IT, I could see myself in that space. And by doing that, I was able to leverage that on the internship. And I got an internship during actually my freshman year in community college. And that experience was, okay, I could see myself doing this for like the next 10 years. It panned out that way.
Was there a certain situation or a moment where that light bulb kind of went on for you, or that passion for business, or you said, oh, this is like this isn't just something I'm going to do today or I've been doing for the last 6 months. This might be my career trajectory for my life.
Yeah, it really was when I got the first paycheck for the first paid client. That was like $438.
Yeah.
I brought that home to my pops.
You remember that, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Every dollar.
Absolutely, and that was, coming home and showing to my pops and my mom, and like my dad is just being extremely ecstatic. And the lady was like, that type of feeling of what you did, you got compensated for it, but something that you're building from scratch, like that was a feeling that doesn't go away. So for me, it was, how can I keep pursuing that feeling? How can I keep building on what I just experienced?
So part of that building aspect for you was actually the desire to learn about leadership, and that's one of the things that drove you into the service. What are some maybe leadership traits that you feel like you've gleaned from your military service or continue to learn from that you now apply in your professional life or in your business life?
Well, my journey's been interesting. So like I was in corporate, I was making more money before I actually went into the Navy. So for me, going into the military was a combination of where I'm at. I'm not getting challenged anymore. I kind of reached a plateau. I want to do more. I kind of like that feeling where you're at, you know you're destined for more, but your current situation is not enabling you to reach that or even progress in that direction. So for me, it was like the military, I can kind of get a sense of, I can get challenged in multiple areas. So leadership development, a sense of managing people, a lot of people at the same time, understanding what does that even entail? What do you need to be able to do that? How do you need to, what's that common goal or objective, and how do you move a group of people towards that? Other dynamic for me was different projects, different exposure, because I was in tech, but I know I go networking, do I liaise between marketing and IT, like different things of what's out there. What can I actually ascertain from knowing, if I know like I have 20 options and I can actually touch 3 or 4 and kind of play around to see if that's something that I really like. I wanted that type of experience as well too.
So for a little bit of context for the audience, how old were you when you made this decision, and then how long had you already been in the corporate world?
So corporate started for me back in, the internship was summer 2008. I started in 2009, January 2009. So I've been in corporate for almost 3 years before I decided to quit. So I was 24. I was about 23 when I first signed my first contract. I signed 3 different contracts. The first 2 were active duty contracts. So I wasn't 100% sure, do I want to go active? I didn't really know about the reserve option until maybe, it was probably like the 3-month mark after I signed the second contract.
Okay.
Because I signed the second contract and I wasn't 100%
confident in that?
Confident in making that decision, and like it was something that was unsettling of, if I do go active, I didn't want to get stuck. I wanted to apply what I can learn and apply it to my business as soon as possible. So I didn't want to be stuck in like a 4-year contract and hate the decision.
Right, right.
So as soon as I found out about the reserve option, I was slated to leave March of 2006, or 2012, sorry. And that 6-month period before I quit in 2011, September 2011 until March, I kind of started a second company where it was more branding related and strategy. And that was my attempt of, let me keep doubling down on the business, but getting that exposure before I actually leave.
So something that's been really interesting in the conversations that we have had at this table is the desire that veterans had while they were in service never left them to do what they did after service. So there was still an interest that you had. It never went away, and it was kind of like stuck with you in the back of your mind.
Right.
I'm going to come back to that in a second, because I want to talk about how you were able to pair something that it maybe culturally seems very different, which is military life, a strict kind of orderly way of doing business, versus what you're doing now, which is creating content, creating media content, working in an IT world. But before we get there, media and entertainment. It's dynamic. It's being created across, Netflix, Hulu. You have it at your, on your handheld all the time. You can get it in so many different aspects. How do you at BLNDED, as a CEO, stay ahead of your competition?
It's a good question. I mean, we're still like early stages. So for us, it's being able to be using the network effect. So being able to be connected with who's doing what, especially here in Austin, that allows us to kind of branch out Texas-wide and beyond that, actually national. So folks that we're in contact in DC to California. So to be able to find your like-minded peers and other companies and organizations that are kind of fighting the same fight or on a similar wavelength, you're able to kind of tap in and even go a bit further wherever you may be at geographically speaking. So that's helped out tremendously of being abreast of what's going on, who's working on what, but at the same time, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the struggles? So how do they overcome those issues and conversations or situations? And that's coming through the conversation with those folks. So network has been huge. Opportunities has come from that as well too. So it's also helping us figure out what and where we can kind of go and how we can actually get better at what we're doing currently too.
So now I want to, again, go back to what we were talking about, the dynamic between networking, you're in a professional environment, as we said, the entertainment and information, even journalism is what you're focused on, is people may say, how is he able to, be in the military and do logistics, which is very regimented, it's very detail-oriented, it's very hierarchical, and you take off that hat and then you're you're networking, you're meeting people, you're maybe going out to happy hours. It seems like they're maybe two different styles. How do you use your military experience in conjunction with the kind of your creative personality and the demands on the job?
Well, for me, it's like living three lives, honestly. So from the technical background, from a corporate standpoint, and we're doing right now more like contract work, blended being the entrepreneurial focus and content, and from a creative element, and then being in the military, which is that more regiment style. So once me kind of go back into searching for that overall leadership development, searching for that exposure and opportunity. I also want to be a part of something that most people don't do as well too, because I didn't go to a regular 4-year university. So some of those aspects, as well as what can I be a part of that will kind of set me apart from the rest of the pack, but will get me where I want to get closer or sooner. So for me, I'm naturally in that entrepreneurial mindset of doing things differently, kind of going outside the box. Obviously, the military is not really designed for that. Today, like my dad was in the Navy, so he was back in '76 on the USS Nimitz. So completely different. Like now it's more corporate. So now it's a little bit more flexibility to say if you have an issue, if you have a problem, if you have a challenge, there's places where you can go. Before, back in the day,
outlets for it?
Yes, back in the day, it wasn't so many outlets. Like you had to do what you needed to do, and that was it. If you had a problem, you go in the back, you handle it. You can't really do that too much these days. So it's helped as far as a little bit of flexibility, be able to say, well, why are we doing it this way? How about we try something a little bit different? It's more open and acceptable. I think depending on what community you're with, like Spec Ops or certain areas in which that freedom is like cultivated internally, it's a little bit of a different experience. General military, you're pretty much more regimented to what's going on. But even in the reserve aspect, what I had to learn was what the system is, who are the players on the board, so to speak, and how do I navigate that? And for what I found, you're kind of managing your own business because it's really you. If you're not attached with a unit that's actually small and really cohesive, you're on your own. So learning that early in my experience being in the reserves, I've been able to choose most of my orders. So I've been in for about 7 years now. I've been able for the probably first 4 years select where I wanted to go because I was in what we call a temporary holding pool. So they don't really want you to sit there. They want you to do something. They want you to be active. So they'll pretty much sign off and approve any orders for the most part.
So you're able to almost pick and choose where you wanted to go in the service,
right?
Which, even though it is regimented, actually does give you some freedom and say over what your career is there.
Absolutely. It may not be the most structured, but for me, I like I like quite a bit of uncertainty and unstructured, but being structured about how I'm actually trying to approach that uncertainty as well. Like, why am I picking these orders? What am I trying to get out of this? So I've been able to be on a ship. I've been underway. I've been on a foreign ship at that, at REMPAC to Seattle as on actual sub. So seeing what's available, knowing where to go, find out what's available. Then from my perspective of that entrepreneurial flavor of, okay, working on a sub, this experience can maybe helping me in this way. Being underway, being out to sea, understanding how things are done, especially from a different Navy, different culture, I found those things very applicable to what I'm trying to do on the media side. That's been a huge thing for me being in the reserves, especially being overseas a few times, being on a mobilization in Bahrain, being able to connect with other people, other cultures, understanding, having those conversations. What we see on TV is different from, the perception on TV is different from the reality in real life. So those things for me, I've personally grown from. So having like a global education, you can't put a price point on that.
Yeah.
So that's been invaluable for me and kind of applying that to blended when it comes to understanding a lot of these stories and different narratives are not being seen and heard, and being able to either have a direct connection with some of those communities. How do you understand the authentic perspective and narrative of why is that story not being told? And for what we're trying to do from a platform standpoint, how do we enable and empower those own communities to tell their own stories?
So is the passion that you had for business when you originally started out, maybe as a teenager, is that now the same excitement that you get when you're telling these stories or when you're connecting with people who may not actually have an opportunity to be heard in whatever the larger narrative may be? Do you still get that same excitement from business as you do telling stories and creating content?
It's Yes, and no in the sense of yes, like just the general focus of that idea and turn that idea and actually bring it to reality. Like that's like core for me because I'm more like the operational and trying to help facilitate making those connections. The content was something new where for me, I was like, let me start documenting my own journey when I was back in Cleveland, when I came back from my training from A school. And some of those opportunities presented itself where I volunteered for the Small Business Development Center at the Urban League. I was then able to have that exposure of talking to mainly African American community, not seeing a lot of innovation, not seeing a lot of different ideas of like barbershops, hair salons, stuff like that we normally do and that we've done well. So that experience for me was, let me kind of branch out from that. I was able to get to my first startup experience. So for me, it was like, let me buy my camera, but it wasn't until I saw Chasing Ice on Netflix. So I put it in perspective. So I came back from A school. That lifestyle that you get regimented to, I wasn't clear that I want to go active, I don't want to stay reserved, I want to focus on the business. So in that 2 months where I really couldn't focus and mentally be on the same page of what the heck I wanted to do, looking at Netflix, looking at Chasing Ice, that documentary I fell in love with the power photography had. It told a non-objective story, but it was so impactful for a scientific community, they had to address the issue of climate change.
Right.
So for me, it was, let me flip that and going down that route, bought my camera. I was able to start working within the startup space, capturing events and stories. But when I got deployed to Bahrain, I took my camera. So PAO is basically the public affairs officer, so I'm enlisted. So I was able to take on that position. I was the only one doing that position for about 10 months, but that was huge exposure. I'm talking with dignitaries, I'm talking to First Star.
You're getting in the room with leadership,
right?
Which is one of the original things that you talked about joining the military for, and now you're seeing it firsthand.
Right.
But your initiative to say, hey, I want to be a part of this, I want to be a part of serving in whatever capacity it may be, opened up doors for you.
Yes.
But I think that's a good, I think, life lesson for especially younger veterans when they leave the service is you have to take chances, you have to take some initiative, because unlike the military, at least what I found as a Marine Corps veteran, I was so used to being told what to do on a daily basis that it took me a while to develop the initiative muscle, if you will, like the muscle memory to say, hey, I need to go take initiative to pursue this opportunity, to pursue this passion. But you've been working on that, and now you're exercising that when you said you're in Bahrain and you're taking photos, and now you're in a high-stakes leadership environment, but you're also doing something that you enjoy, which is documenting and taking photographs.
Right.
That's awesome.
And that exposure it gets you into the room, it gets you to talking to other folks that are maybe higher up, further along in life or whatnot, but you don't know what doors those could potentially open. So being able to be open, I think it's been a huge thing of, as you're chasing your purpose, or finding your passion, the more persistent, the more consistent you are with it, people start taking notice. Whether it's folks that get it or don't get it, as soon as people start to really understand or have a little grasp on wait a minute, what are you working on?
Yeah, what's he working on? Yeah.
Or seeing someone else come to that person, that situation, that bring more light to it.
Did you experience that then? Did people go, hey, why are you constantly doing this, or why are you so passionate about that?
It wasn't so much of that question, but more so of the overall idea. I was like 20 years in the future with it. So as soon as I started doing the Humans of New York approach to the photography side of like, what are entrepreneurs of colors, why are they doing what they're doing, and what's the experience, and what are they doing next? That was able to kind of put the overall vision into more context, especially when I got the website up and rolling. But it also helped with bringing mentors, advisors, other folks that want to tell their story to what I was doing.
Right.
So yeah, it was a huge help of having some type of structure and consistency with what you're doing, and showing that progression of he may not be where he wants to be, but people are seeing that he's actually moving forward in whatever that issue or whatever that project they're working on.
One of these ideas that I've kind of batted around in my head while we've done these podcasts and while we've had these conversations is, I think that there is sometimes in veterans' heads the dilemma, and maybe it's a moral dilemma, about not using their military experience to get a job because they feel like it maybe cheapens a very personal experience. And if you view service in those terms, if you've had friends or family members who have maybe died in service or have been wounded in service, when you go searching for a job, you may not feel comfortable using that experience in your life to benefit your own circumstance. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So what would you tell a veteran to say, hey, in no way are you cheapening that experience, you're not commercializing that experience, but it is important for you to learn how that experience shapes you so that it can benefit your life in the corporate world or wherever it may be. Do you have kind of some thoughts about that, or have you experienced that yourself?
I haven't experienced it in that way personally. What I would kind of say to that is especially with going in the military in the first place, everyone has a different reasons for why they went in. So understanding more of the long game of whether it be I'm getting away from a situation, I'm getting away from my current circumstances, especially what I've experienced from young people coming into the military, there's no real plan to it. You know, it's I may get in, I want to buy a car, I want to buy a house, this, that, and the third, and then you get deployed. It's like, and they tell you not to do that. Right, but they tell you not to do that in the first place because you're wasting your money. But the long-term plan of why am I going in? What am I trying to get out of it? The military is going to get what they need out of you. So what can you go into the military with a plan of action of I'm going in for this reason or these reasons. I'm trying to get this education. I'm trying to get these benefits that is applicable to whatever my passion or interests are when I get out the military. And when it comes to maybe a 9-to-5, which from my perspective of looking at who's done what thus far, it helps you with kind of with the planning of like Joseph Copser. And it wasn't until I actually moved to Austin, but another connection I made when I went out to San Francisco during my basically, you know, you're on deployment for over a year. They'll give you 2 weeks to go R&R anywhere. So I went to California for that benefit. So actually reaching out and knowing about Joseph, knowing he's an advisor to Vets in Tech, I was like, let me go and talk to him. But just a 30-minute conversation with him ended me having an internship with his company. Yeah. So I had no intent, but it was some of those things of what is the ultimate plan. I wanted to get into business. It took a conversation with Joseph to have that opportunity and kind of like exposure into the startup space and what he was actually building. He had already got acquired at the time with Daimler, but like seeing his mentality, he has all his employees read books, like those type of experiences was huge benefit for me, but it also put into perspective, there's mostly a disconnect between civilian and military of who we are, why we're doing, what do we do, and how does that apply to what the day-to-day or 9-to-5 may be. Yeah, aspect in the office or wherever it may be, regardless of what your job is. Right. And that's what I keep coming back to, and maybe I think you've kind of answered it, is that you may go into the military with a certain expectation, but if you have a goal to join the military, once you leave, regardless of what your circumstances were in the military, you can't forget why you joined to begin with. Right. And if you joined because you wanted to learn about leadership, if you joined because you wanted to serve your country, those are things that should still be valuable to you after you leave the service and you come back to Austin, or you're in Dallas, or you're in Houston, San Antonio, wherever it may be, all across the state. It's still extremely valuable for veterans to return to their communities and find out where they can serve, and to your point, find out where they can lead. That's where I think the network is crucial of, we're in a global organization, multiple branches, but it's global. So how do you tap in? Whether it be the folks that you serve with, whether it be officers, whether it be places that you went, how do you leverage all of that network and exposure and expertise of being able to articulate with people, being able to operationalize things, logistics, whatever it may be, whatever that skill set may be, how do you help leverage your community and your network to help you figure out, okay, I may be interested in these 3 things. I may not know how to get there, but I can ask questions with people that may be there or may be close to it. How do you leverage that network? Other organizations, which I think has been a huge focus on veterans and trying to help shift that narrative of we're more than, being in the military, we're more than just that service, but a lot of people that don't understand what does that service look like and how is that applicable across the board. So like Team Rubicon is an organization I volunteer with. Yeah. So like they're focused on first response situations, especially national disasters, but it reminds me of deployment, that the community that you're with, the people, the conversations, the things that you do and how you do what you do. So those things for me was, even though I'm a reservist, someone that's on the active duty side, someone that may have served for like 15, 20 years or whatnot, that familiarity of the folks, the experience, what you're doing, how you're doing what you're doing, mentally is a huge help in wherever you're at in life. Whether it be I'm going through some issues, whether it be I may not know where I want to go or how I want to do certain things. Those things that are familiar when you were in the service are a huge benefit of I'm okay.
Yes, yeah.
You know.
Well, I think, and this is a little bit why we have these conversations for our audience, for those listening. If you're not in the service or you have family members who may be, and we hope that you'll share these conversations with them, because I think it is important for veterans to know that when they come into a corporate environment or a business environment, or if it's their first time out of the military, if they're going in an academic environment at school, it's important for them to go find veterans who have similar experiences than them, like you said, so that I always come back to the mindset of you want veterans to feel like you're a fish back in water. And it may take a little bit, you may feel a little uncomfortable, but if you find people with like-minded experiences, you kind of feel like yourself again. And I think that was kind of what your experience with Tomb Rubicon is. You kind of felt like you were back in that environment, and I think it's extremely impactful, because then once you feel comfortable, you realize that there's other ways that you can contribute after your military service.
Right.
Last question for you, and we're going to let you go.
Okay.
If I could ask you where you see yourself in 5 years, where do you see Naji Kelley in 5 years?
It's a tough question because it consistently changes. My thing has always been wherever the business takes me. So I mean, I've been in reserve for 7 years, so I'm actually getting ready to re-enlist at the end of July or end of June. So my intent is to be able to leverage that experience once again, so probably do another deployment. But with that, it's how do you leverage that as seed money? So it will be both for the business, but it will also kind of get into the real estate arena as well too. So my thing is like helping to build generational wealth within my family.
Sure.
That creates more entrepreneurial activities, hopefully. But being able to kind of, what is laying down that foundation for not only yourself, but your family and the next generation to be able to kind of catapult what you've done and what you've experienced, that's been my main focus. So the military is going to allow me to do that from a seed money standpoint, but even on that access of or exposure of more active duty time, I'm able to add more to my benefits and have that long term. So that's the plan on the military side.
Sure. And
with BLNDED being able to consistently kind of build up our portfolio, then the platform is to be that opportunity to connect folks. We're focused on communities of color, whether it be the entrepreneur, creative, student. If you want to go to the entrepreneur, if you want to go to the creative track, even if you want to go to the workforce track, how do you leverage community and having that commonality of where I come from, what are some of the circumstances that I'm dealing with, but what's available, what's possible, who's doing it.
What are the doors that I can get to?
Right, and more of those warm doors where you don't have to go it by yourself. So we're trying to help blend that in the sense of bringing those communities together outside of the silo effects.
Sure.
And bringing them and connecting them to companies and organizations that exist that can help them get to where they want to get to long term. So I would still be actively working on that and kind of building out the team to take it to another level where technology will help us kind of reach the masses in that sense.
So for our viewers, for the listeners, where can they follow you in your journey over the next 5 years, and where can they follow BLNDED Media?
Well, social media,
I know, it's everything.
It's a plus and a minus.
I guess that's true.
So with BLNDED, we're spelled blended without the first E, so BLNDED, and that's intentional. So until we have equality and more of an ecosystem that is fostering that, we'll then add in the E.
That's awesome.
So Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, BLNDED, BLNDED Media. Myself, you can find me, it's Naji H. Kelley. I gotta make sure I pay respect to my grandmother. So it's Naji Hakeem Kelley, but Naji H. Kelley, Kelley, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, I'm all over. So my thing, or one of my final feedback, if you will, is
Sure.
Any veteran, whether you're a veteran, especially we didn't even really talk about the veteran spouses and like the community, the family aspect. If you need help, if you have questions, if you need or feel like you're lost or whatever it may be, knowing what's available, knowing what's the opportunities, whether it be organizations, people, the Veteran Land Bank, like what is available for me to take advantage of. Whether I can be of assistance or point someone in the right direction, or still being in the military, connect folks with other people that can be helpful, feel free to reach out. And once again, I appreciate being here and the opportunity to kind of tell the story. Which I'm hoping can be a catalyst for something else or someone else's life where, yes, I can, how can I get involved, and what are some of those steps to make it happen?
Absolutely. And I think that, to your point, I think we can just end it there, because that's exactly what we're trying to do here at the Voices of Veterans, is to encourage veterans to continue to serve in their communities, as Naji was just saying, to continue to lead in their business settings or across any industry here in the great state of Texas. On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush and the Veterans Land Board, Naji, I would just like to thank you for being here today. Thanks for sharing your story and so much inspiration that you have. I know it's really pouring out of you, and I know that's going to be really beneficial for veterans who are watching this, as well as folks all the way across the great state of Texas. Until next time, you can follow us at www.voicesofveterans.org or here on Instagram at Voices of Vets. Thank you for joining us. Please give us a like or a share on Facebook to tell everyone about the success stories of Texas veterans. See you next time.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.